Wow, das wäre wichtig.
Okay, so I think we can get started. Thank you very much for everybody to come. Well, today we're gonna welcome Johannes, who has initiated this event. I'm the CEO of Wishful, the organizations who is just providing the building. So I actually don't have anything to say, or I don't have any idea about what's going on here. But
cool. Yeah.
Very much looking forward.
Yes.
Should we turn on the lights?
Yes.
Yeah.
Christoph, willst du das Licht ausmachen?
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian and Christoph, for hosting us all. I'm Johannes. I wanted to make a round of introductions, but I think that would take a while. I'll just say a little bit about myself. I'm an effective altruist since last year, but I've been working on energy and climate issues pretty much for the last decade. So for me, bringing these things together kind of feels very natural. My talk is going to be about approaching effective altruism, approaching energy and climate from an effective altruist perspective, and providing a reconceptualization of how to actually do this, because until now, EAs have kind of treated climate change not very thoroughly, I would say. And we're going to start with a music video, which was produced by or financed by Bill Gates, and it's actually on the topic of this evening. Yeah. So, yeah, we watched the video, and it has a lot of the central concepts that I'm going to talk about. Okay. Autoplay. Yeah. It has a lot of the concepts that I'm going to talk about in the next hour or so. It's time to expand the reach of our compassion, which is essentially EA in one sentence. It's hitting the poorest, the hardest. We need to decarbonize. We need to get emissions to zero. And there's a lot of need for technology and technological innovation and human innovation. Technological innovation and not resource depletion. So like there's no peak oil in time or behavioral change will not drive that. Sorry, it's jumping around. Yeah, before we begin in earnest, a couple of views on my own. That's very important because I work in this field, but this is not my work position. Ask questions anytime. Stupid questions are those that are not being asked. And I think that will also make it, because it's going to be somewhat a long talk, so I think we should rather discuss in the middle and not just have a long question and answer at the end. And yeah, collaborative prioritization. There's lots of stuff I can cover. So if you feel like I should skip something or go into more depth or something, also just let me know. Yeah, some special things. So, and first, like, what does it mean to approach this topic from an effective altruist perspective? And let love be your energy is kind of the slogan. So what does it mean? I mean, care deeply and broadly across time, location, and species, expanding the moral circle. I think that's pretty clear. Care equally, and in a world of constant moral catastrophe, if you're compelled to use rationality to do as much good as you possibly can. And so that's kind of the altruism part. And then there's the rationality part. So what does it mean to be rational when you talk about energy and climate change? So of course, as an effective altruist, always think counterfactually and at the margin, like what does my effort do, or what happens if I don't do this? So for example, we'll get to examples where this is very important when it comes to emission trading systems. This point is also very important. Don't let your preferences shape your beliefs. So don't, when you prefer a specific technology or a specific strategy to solve a problem, don't let that define what you believe, whether this is possible or not. And epistemic humility, being honest about huge uncertainty and finding a way to deal with this. Yeah, so and I'm going to just introduce or give some more concrete examples of epistemic humility and non-wishful thinking. So this is technology. So on the left-hand side, what you can see is the expected cost of solar power in 2030, according to expert estimates. And what you can see, I mean, it's not very large, but so essentially there's about an order of magnitude difference in the estimates of what solar energy will cost in 2030. And there's also not really, I mean, these are different expert groups, and this is the aggregated across experts. There's not really like a clear peak. Like any of these prices between 0.003 per kilowatt hour of electricity to 0.30 seem somewhat equally plausible. And in this kind of situation where we have massive uncertainty, we need to make decisions about climate energy all the time. And note that this is solar power. So solar power is a technology technology that's been around for 60 years, where we have a very good understanding of how it develops over time, which we're already deploying rather massively. So even though this is such a well-known technology, the best experts that make estimates on this are massively uncertain what this technology will cost in only 14 years into the future. And I think the second one is also clear, or is preference belief independent. So, I mean, a lot of the energy debates are around questions like, can we satisfy our energy demand with renewables, or can we not do that? And I mean, this is in itself should be a question that should be independent of whether you like renewables or whether you like nuclear more. But of course, in fact, these things are often in fact, these things are often very strongly related to each other, and it's also really hard to make them independent of each other because the uncertainties are so large that you can essentially almost justify almost any position. So this is kind of a precursor, maybe also a word of caution. Yeah, so points I'm going to argue. I'm going to argue that on energy and climate policy, that effective altruists should approach this issue as like be broadly pro-low carbon. I'm going to explain what this means. That they should be cautious about offsetting, like offsetting is the general recommendation from giving what we can. When you do want to do something about climate change, donate to Cool Earth and buy rainforest. I think effective altruists should champion energy innovation. Should make sure that if we care about our own behavior to solve the problem, we actually do things that make sense, because a lot of things don't because of specific regulations. And yeah, we should ideally engage the energy policy debates. And also more generally about effective altruism, the concept of cause area that's often used without asking very much about it is kind of obscuring, and we probably need some intermediary concept. And yeah, of course, effective altruists should wonder whether they should take this topic more seriously in general. And I mean, this is kind of the... Yeah?
I just want to say that development cooperation is a much better word than intervention. Very technocratic. That's why I dislike this word very much.
Okay, where's the word innovation?
Intervention is much more general. It means like strategy. Could be anything. Like approach.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I'm just going to do this. Okay. So, what does it mean to be pro-low carbon? Or why am I not using the term clean energy? Because the term clean energy is very loaded and like used in very different ways. So if you ask the Chinese, then clean energy includes nuclear and carbon capture and storage. If you ask the German government, it's only renewables. So I'm kind of avoiding this term, and I say pro-low carbon, or you could also say pro-decarbonization. So this includes renewables, includes nuclear, fission and fusion, and also includes carbon capture and storage. And yeah, this is kind of the menu for tonight. So yeah, we already have this, and I'm going to talk about low carbon energy and the causes it interacts with. This is kind of like reframing climate change and energy from an EA perspective. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what the situation is in energy, why I think innovation and pushing innovation should really be an EA strategy. And then there's some optional content. So, yeah. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to do cost prioritization for the topic. Who is familiar with cost prioritization? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, essentially it's the EA way to approach the topic and, yeah, how to choose the cost area to spend effort on. I mean, it's informed by micro thinking, which I talked before, and counterfactual thinking. And then there are these three criteria, like how important is it, how much suffering can I avoid, how much well-being can I create, attractability, what are the interventions that there are, how certain are we they're working, and neglectedness, like is this a field where already a lot of people are working on, or is this something where we can make a lot of difference? Yeah, and when EAs have talked about climate change thus far, there's mostly been like three sources who did this. There's Doing Good Better from Will McCaskill, there's the Giving What We Can report, and there's the Global Priorities Project report on catastrophic risk as social features of climate change. And I'm mostly going to talk about the first one. I also have text on the other ones, but I'm going to skip this today. So, if you look at Doing Good Better, how does Will assess climate change, and this is now 2 to 4 degree Celsius climate change. So the scale or the importance is obviously fairly large. There's a lot of suffering or a lot of consequences of climate change. The tractability is somewhat medium. It's pretty clear how to address it as an individual, but on the other hand, on the political side, it seems very intractable or very difficult to make actual progress. And it's seen as not very neglected because, I mean, obviously it has a lot of public attention and there's also quite a lot of money going into it. So this is kind of the standard view of EA on climate change, where it's seen as important, somewhat tractable, but ultimately it's not taken very seriously as an EA cause because it's seen as not very neglected. And importantly, this is for 2 to 4 degrees climate change, which is kind of something which is already catastrophic, but not the worst kind of climate change scenarios that we have. And in Doing Good Better, and also in the Giving What We Can report on climate change, then catastrophic climate change, which is defined as like even worse than 4 degrees, up to 5, 6, 10 degrees warming, is treated as a distinct cause. So you have a chapter on climate change, you have another chapter on extremely catastrophic climate change, and you're kind of assuming that you can treat those two things as distinct things. And I think this is what my first critique would be. Because if you look at different scenarios of warming, like here it's from less than 2 degrees to over 6 degrees, the probability distribution here. So what essentially these reports assume is that we can split this here in half. We can decide these are non-catastrophic scenarios, these are catastrophic scenarios, and we can perfectly assess where we are right now. But can we do that really? Because there's a lot of uncertainty about what the effect of policy is on emissions and of economic growth and emissions. There's a lot of uncertainty about the sensitivity of the climate, so how much emissions do actually lead to how much warming. And yeah, so essentially in our current situation, we could be going here, we could be going here, we could be going here. We have like a certain probability distribution about this, but we don't really know for certain. And with these different levers, there's really a massive degree of uncertainty. And so when you kind of distinguish these two and say we don't need to treat them as an integrated cause, but we can prepare for them separately or evaluate them separately in an EA framework, we're kind of assuming that we understand fairly well how emissions translate into warming, because otherwise we wouldn't know how seriously to take the issue. And also that if we decided at some point in the future, like in 10, 15 years, that this should become an important EA topic, that we could quickly change the situation, and that there's a low degree of carbon lock-in, so that there's a high flexibility of the world economy to actually reduce carbon emissions quickly. or that there are negative emission technologies readily available. Yeah, and interestingly, so the interesting thing about this and EAs on this topic is that both giving what we can and doing it better kind of make the simplified assumption that they can treat this distinctively and they take catastrophic climate change way more seriously. Then interestingly, there's also the report from the Global Priorities Project, which kind of tells policymakers they should aggregate over this entire curve and probability distribution. So this is actually what I mean. So the Global Priorities Project actually agrees that you cannot differentiate these different causes or these different scenarios because there's a lot of uncertainty about where we're actually. You're looking there, Steph. Okay. So this is kind of one thing, or one critique where I think EAs often get climate change somewhat wrong. And another one is the use of cause area. So people go and say, hey, there's climate change, and then they say, okay, it's not very neglected. And then often the approach is, okay, let's go to the next topic. But how do we actually know that climate change is a cause area? So, or what is a cause area? So if you think about climate change, you can think about climate change just as climate change. You could think about, since we're at the WEBU, you could think about veganism just in terms of animal suffering, or you could think about it in terms of animal suffering, climate change, all these other things that we saw in the video. So it's very arbitrary what you define as cause area. When you would define as cause area that we have abundant clean energy, for example, or abundant low carbon energy, that would affect climate change, that would affect energy poverty, which is a massive problem, which affects air pollution, which is a massive problem. You might come to very, very different conclusions about this. But because we're just taking cause area as given, and climate change is somewhat more predominant in the public discussion, we come to the conclusion that everything that is below there that could possibly address climate change is not something that EA should focus on. Oh, sorry, change that. Yeah, and I think you can see this more visually here. And this is climate change. Many different ways to solve or reduce the impact of climate change. Going vegan, phasing out coal, also solving air pollution, saving forests to get more CO2, so deforestation, or solving energy poverty. And that's what I'm going to focus on here. It's like different strategies. So one of them is clean energy deployment, building a lot of clean energy infrastructure right now. Another one is clean energy innovation. And for both of these issues, if you had abundant low carbon energy, you could address climate change, you could address air pollution, you could address energy poverty. So why not explore this as a cause area with all the different benefits that it has, instead of saying, okay, climate change is not effective. Yeah, so that's what I'm gonna do. So if you think about energy poverty, it's not something I think in general we talk about a lot, but in India alone we have over 300 million people that don't have access to electricity. Over the world we have over 1 billion people that don't have access to electricity, so like about every 7th person doesn't have access to electricity. We have almost 3 billion people that rely on wood and dung to cook, with massive negative health effects. So it's because of indoor air pollution, it kills about like 4 million people every year. And something else, what's important about energy and energy growth, when you listen to the German discussion, or I would say the European discussion, you would often talk very much about energy efficiency. And oftentimes the rebound effect, so the idea that when you have a more efficient energy supply, actually part of that, what you save in terms of money, goes into more energy. Is pretty strong in developing countries, because more energy is pretty strongly correlated to better living conditions. So if you think about it from an EA perspective, I would say the expectation that energy demand is going to double or maybe even triple until mid-century is actually a good thing for the most part. For the most part, this is related to massive improvements in quality of life. And you can also see this here. So this is the relationship between energy footprint, which is how much energy a country uses, and Human Development Index as a measure of quality of life. And you see a pretty staggering relationship. And I think, one thing that's really interesting about this curve is that this curve explains 90% of the variation, so it has a very good fit, like a lot of the, not necessarily a causal relationship, but a lot of the strong relationship between energy footprint and human development is very predictable. It's also a logarithmic function, so it kind of levels off, which makes sense. So if you're in the US or Europe, there's not as much additional well-being that you get from more energy. But here, in the beginning, where poor countries, China, India, Brazil, are kind of moving upward the ladder over time, there's a very steep increase in human development with increased energy. So this is not very surprising, but that's an issue that's very often overlooked. Sorry.
Who's that cloud down there who is actually like that below the, no, up computer, that cluster, no, on the other graph, on the right, upper right, like
I
that.
think
The one with a very high footprint, but not
On the right
human
side.
development, on the right, yeah.
This one?
Yes.
That's probably the US.
Oh, it's only one country? Okay.
Yeah, this is over time.
Oh,
so these
okay.
are 40 countries over time. So what you can see here, I think, this one's India or China, increasing over time. So yeah.
The US, okay, I see.
Yeah. So the US is less developed for its energy, which kind of makes sense because they're wasting a lot of energy. Americans use about twice as much energy as Europeans, and there's not a big difference in terms of living quality. Yeah, but I think, this is 40 countries, but you see a very, very clear relationship. And so this, I think, is interesting. And I think one interesting thing is if you talk about the amounts of energy here, and if we talk about what we as the global community aim for, we aim for 2030 that everyone has energy access, which is defined as not relying on wood and dung to cook in the house, and to have enough electricity to power a lamp for a battery, a light bulb for 5 hours, 2 light bulbs for 5 hours a day, a mobile phone and something. So the definition of what is defined as universal energy access is so low that it'll probably be here somewhere, which is not what we would consider a wealthy life. Poverty made a little bit more bearable, but it's not something to strive for. So when we, at least when I hear in 2030, okay, we're going to strive for universal energy access, that's definitely a worthy goal to strive for, but that doesn't seem to solve this problem. And I think another important aspect is energy abundance as a problem-solving joker. This is a desalination plant. So if you think about, the climate change that we're already kind of committed to, and also other environmental or other problems. Having more energy will be very useful for a lot of things, so like desalination, transforming salt water into usable fresh water. The same goes for ACs, to deal with heat, or refrigerators, like to dealing with heat, dealing with cold. Yeah, if you want the powering robots solving important problems. So like there's a lot of things we cannot really anticipate right now, but I think where it's pretty clear to assume that having more energy will make it much easier to solve a lot of pressing problems. Yeah, and let's go to air pollution. So these are disability-adjusted life years lost due to air pollution every year from the Global Burden of Disease Project in million dollars lost per year. And there's two important differences here. One, ambient particulate matter, so this is essentially outside air pollution, which mostly comes from coal and oil, so 69 million. And then there's household air pollution that comes from those almost 3 billion people that rely on wood to cook. And together, air pollution, so these numbers don't exactly add up. I need to look into these definitions more, but I mean, these two are also very important to keep distinct because they have very different mechanisms. But the important thing is that this kills much more than malaria does. I mean, much more than actually any air pollution is kind of one of the leading causes of disability-adjusted life year loss. About 7 million premature deaths every year. And also the trajectory is very different. I mean, for malaria, we kind of know that we're going to eradicate it. We don't really know how long it will take us, and it makes sense to accelerate it, but it's not really something, at least as far as I know, I would be worried about to have still in 2050. The situation is different for air pollution. I mean, especially for outdoor air pollution, because the world still adds massive amounts of coal to our energy mix. So actually the estimates for this are that they're going to increase by 50% or something. So air pollution is not a solved problem. And it's a problem that's easy to be very neglected because it feels very probabilistically. Like, you don't see people, I mean, except for if you're in an extreme situation, Beijing or something, you don't usually see people dying from air pollution because you know statistically that's a very big factor, but it's very unobservable, which makes it very likely to be neglected. Yeah, and of course, there's climate change, wide range of estimates. So for example, what kind of our climate policies right now built on, like the median scenario for 2 degrees. There are now a lot of studies that estimate that the sensitivity of the climate might be much higher, so that lower emission levels will actually induce more warming. I wouldn't say that this is the consensus, but I would say there's a lot of uncertainty there, and it's an uncertainty that we don't acknowledge in public discourse when we read in the news that if we follow through with this climate policy, we will have 2 degrees of warming. Essentially, we're completely reducing the enormous uncertainty that we have about this in our public discussions. Yeah, it could be an indirect existential risk. So if you have scenarios with 5 or 6 degrees of warming, they would be pretty catastrophic, and I mean could also, induce a lot of other risks, making wars, etc., more likely. Yeah. Also, probably a major source of animal suffering, of course, something that isn't taken into the mainstream discussions of climate change, but very much an issue, I would say. So yeah, kind of summing up this section, doing cost prioritization on the level of causes is problematic because what is the cause is kind of arbitrary. And what about strategies and interventions that affect many causes, like clean energy abundance or also veganism? Yeah, importance, neglectedness, and tractability don't necessarily exist on the level of causes. They could also exist on levels much lower than that. And yeah, since it interacts with many important causes, it makes sense to look at low carbon energy in more detail. And that would be the next step, except for if you want to take a break. Ask some questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Would you care to very briefly explain how animals are badly affected by climate change?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of biodiversity loss because of climate change, because the temperature, I mean, it's getting warmer, etc., or like climate variability really changes. And I think a major other aspect is ocean acidification. So the oceans are taking up a lot of CO2 and getting more acidic, which is also, yeah.
So, you mean we lose species and number of individuals, yes?
Yeah, so I think the animal thing is not so clear because
But it's not like you're talking in terms of suffering, which would be, I think, more normal.
I mean, yeah, if you have the like wild animal suffering view, that animals in the wild in general suffer more than anything else, then you maybe would say climate change is a good thing. But I mean, or like I mean, that's like probably there are EA saying that.
Might I propose something? And I can be totally wrong, but that a higher temperature causes more production of life, and that there are more individual suffering, so that even a higher world temperature would increase wild animal suffering.
Yeah, Brian Tomasic.
Yeah, something.
At least that's plausible. I think we don't know.
Yeah, if you had to make a best guess of the sign of the effect, we would say it's worse.
Yeah.
Higher temperature is worse.
Yeah,
I mean,
suffering. Yeah.
I think there's also another argument. I mean, if you think about like in which societies like veganism takes hold, or like it's not in societies where people are poor or are very troubled. It's in societies that are very well off and that kind of have the mental capacity to care about other beings. So I think if you think about a catastrophic climate change scenario where like humanity is really struggling, I don't think that this would be very good for norms regarding taking care of animals, etc. So like I think having a prosperous world is ultimately better for animals. Maybe not in the short term, but I think in the long term. That would be my guess, but it's not my focus topic. I'm paid by the ministries and they don't care about animals. So yeah, now we're gonna do the deep dive into what does the situation in energy actually look like and what's the trajectory. So this is energy consumption until 2014, and this is fossil fuels. And this is everything that is low carbon. This one here is, the yellow one is wind and solar or other renewables that are not hydro. Then this is hydroelectricity, and then this is nuclear. It's 2014, so in 2015 the share might be a little bit higher, though I'm not sure because we're also adding a lot of fossil capacity, even though we're not talking so much about it. So I'm not sure the share is actually higher, the absolute thing might be a little bit higher. But this just gives you a perspective about where we're at. And also note that this hasn't really changed very much. I mean, at least not so much that one would say that this is a clear trend going this way. And also, when you talk about renewables, as already being like cost competitive and kind of coming like in 10 years we're all just going to have solar and wind. If you look at different energy technologies and their cost over time, like levelized cost, what you can see is that sometimes, so for example sometimes onshore wind can indeed be cheap, like in the UK. can be the cheapest. But then if you add up storage, which is this here, that's not true anymore. And if you would add the cost for expanding the grid or having fossil backup capacity, which you need, it would probably go even higher. So it's true that renewables are sometimes cost competitive, or certain shares of renewables, like having 5 or 10% or 15% of your energy mix from renewables being cost competitive, but it's not true that that right now we would have 100% renewable energy, and this would be like cost effective or cheap. Right now the situation is such that because storage technology is not developed enough yet, that for every 10 gigawatts of renewable capacity that you add, you need about 6 to 7 gigawatts of fossil capacity as a backup because of the intermittency, because it's only sometimes sunny, only sometimes the wind is blowing. So to kind of compensate this in a situation where you don't have storage technologies that work on large scales, you need a lot of fossil backup. That's also what you see in Germany, essentially, where emissions are not decreasing, or at least the carbon intensity is not decreasing.
And those facilities are then only running on demand?
Yeah, they're then running on demand, and then they're becoming more expensive because, of course, like if you have a coal plant, ideally you would run it almost all of the time. So then it's, yeah. So then you often hear the argument that the high energy costs are due to the fossil capacity, which is of course true, but the fact that the fossil capacity can only run sometimes is of course due to the renewables. So I mean, I think if you take all of the costs that are related to restructuring your energy system, it's not the situation that it's very cheap to switch to a large share of renewables. I mean, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it just means that there isn't like a natural order of things that this is going to happen like directly and swiftly. Yeah, and storage costs really right now are very much a bottleneck. Yeah, and this is kind of, if we go from energy to climate change, this is until 2030. This blue thing is the median 2-degree emission projection, which we could have. This green line here is what countries have pledged to do, and the most ambitious version of what they have pledged to do. So in 2030, we would have a gap of 12 gigatons of CO2. So it's like a tremendous gap between commitments of the world community, and even those are not really like enforceable. So, and then what we kind of where we would need to go at. So there's a massive gap in the trajectory. Yeah, and I think this is where I'm kind of switching to technology and technological innovation. So on the last slide you saw that already to 2030 there's a massive gap. And the important thing is that decarbonization scenarios actually become a lot more aggressive after 2030. Because it's easier, the farther you go into the future, the easier it is to make ambitious commitment to that over that period for a political decision maker. So this also really stresses the need for new technologies, because I mean, of course, right now there are still some like low-hanging fruits we can pick in terms of decreasing our energy consumption or making it more efficient, but it's really not clear that this will go on like this. And kind of the technologies that we want to have in 2030, we better invest in them very soon. Yeah, and if this is about coal. So this is coal in China, and right now, or this is like a year ago now, the projection kind of is that if you build only like 1/3 of the coal capacity that right now is planned, it's already almost going to be impossible to meet the 2-degree target. And the trend to build more coal hasn't changed. In fact, as we saw before, with the relationship between energy growth and increasing well-being, most of the emerging industrializing countries are building massive amounts of new coal. And that kind of underscores the importance of the technology carbon capture and storage, so technology that can make coal or other fossil fuels carbon neutral by sequestering the carbon and then storing it.
Yes, sorry?
Yeah.
Is it a common position of EA? Because I know there's also some skeptical opinions on that topic.
On which topic?
CCS.
I mean, nothing. I mean, this is. I mean, I'm trying to apply this. I'm not saying. I'm not characterizing EA now. I'm saying how I think we should think about that.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about CCS, I mean, I'm not sure of any EAs who talk about CCS, but I know that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is like kind of the leading body summarizing research on these issues. What they say is they can't come up with a scenario for 2 degrees warming without carbon capture and storage. So like they're running their models and they're saying we can't come up with a scenario without this. And also, if you think about negative emissions technologies, I mean, this would make, like for coal, this would make it neutral. If you would,
if it works properly.
Yeah.
In long term.
Yeah, and if you do it with biofuels, you could actually be could be carbon negative. You could use biofuels to suck up carbon and then burn it and then store the carbon. And by now, like all like real, I mean, it's always hard to say all, but the large majority of models, like energy models and policy kind of assumptions, are always that we're going to need negative emissions technologies to constrain climate change, because we're like so far ahead already in terms of our emissions, and it doesn't really look like we're going to radically decrease them very soon. So yeah. I would say that CCS isn't really controversial on the expert level dealing with that. I think it becomes controversial, like for example, in the German policy discussion, which I think is really schizophrenic in a way. It's like, yeah. It's a little bit, yeah. I would say it's ignoring reality.
What actually is carbon capture and storage? Is it planting trees, or is it some technology to actually suck up the carbon? What is it technologically? What do you do in order to get a carbon capture and storage?
Grundsätzlich einfach eine ganz elementäre, was ist das?
What do you have to build to
I mean, like, okay, so you need essentially 2 technologies. Like, if you have a coal power plant, you need technology to get the carbon, like to kind of capture the carbon
from the air. You have to.
Well, I mean, a coal power plant, you don't have to capture it from the air, but you can capture it from the coal plant.
Oh, yeah.
And then you need to store it, or you can also utilize it. That's carbon capture and utilization, which is of course preferable, but probably doesn't have the scale that we.
So it's basically about preventing it from escaping the power plant, and not about extracting it from the existing air.
Well, I mean, that would be something else. I mean, that would be a negative emission technology, right? You would capture it from the air. And then you would have something like burning biofuels, like BECS, it's called, like bioenergy CCS, which is kind of, like a very old school way to capture it from the air, like microblends.
Biofuels aren't feasible at all. Biofuels aren't feasible at all. It's
I'm not saying that
impossible to do, even being close to target all the energy demand by biofuels.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that we should do that. I'm just saying, No.
So, what did you say in coal plants? You don't have to capture the carbon from the air, but that the air.
Like not from, I mean, like of course from the air in the coal plant, but I mean there it's highly concentrated there. It's much easier, much cheaper to capture.
Outside the general air, but I mean instead the
so like
smoke.
So for carbon capture, for like coal plants, we kind of have a rough idea of how we would do this. I mean it's not really done at a large scale, but but it's clear that this is much easier and especially much cheaper than to extract carbon from the air where it's so much less concentrated. So CCS from coal plants is the easy thing, and negative emissions technology is the hard thing.
As there are just testing projects, for example in Schwarze Pumpe, in Lausitz, it's very hard, I think, to say that in the long run it really works. I think there are no studies yet. So it won't meet the scientific approach EA has.
No, I would disagree with that. So I mean, I think there is carbon capture demonstration, and also I mean I would say, given what we know about economic growth and emission growth and the climate system, we have to make this work. So just because it's not, I mean. Like as EAs, it doesn't mean we only care about technologies that we already have, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be so worried about AI risk. It's more like it's a plausible technology to develop, and what I'm going to argue is we should spend way more effort to actually develop this and other technologies. One more question, and then I think.
But do you also believe in storing nuclear waste then?
But
do you think it's technologically possible?
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure we're gonna get to that, but.
Well, we should.
We should get to that. That's why I'm moving on. So, and this is really a crucial point, not only because of the first, but not the last XKCD comment. Energy is really more than electricity. If you're in Germany and you use the term Energiewende, like energy transition, it sounds as if it's about energy, while in fact it's mostly about electricity, which is really just the easiest sector, the easiest part of energy to decarbonize. If you think about mobility, if you think about heating, these are also massive sources of carbon emissions on similar scales than electricity, and we're much less advanced in knowing how to decarbonize this. In fact, our main strategy right now seems to be we're going to try to electrify everything because we know how to make electricity low carbon, or at least we have a much better idea for that. So yeah, this is XKCD number 2. And yeah, I think this is like also, the hidden risk of gambling 100% renewables. I mean, this here is an XKCD comic where the wind plant actually becomes dangerous. It's of course not the case, but the big risk, and this is why I say this is my personal view because it's not the German government's view. The big risk with 100% renewables are saying like, okay, we really want to power the entire world based on renewables, is that we actually don't know that this is possible. I mean, it might be technologically possible in terms of engineering, etc. Like if we were willing to spend massive amounts of money on it, it would be. But in the real world, where climate change is not exactly our most pressing concern for most people, when we say that we want to solve this problem with 100% renewables, we gamble on very optimistic assumptions about renewable scalability, about energy efficiency and energy demand. And my question is that a smart idea for a potential existential risk? And what I think I find especially inconsistent there is like when you're very concerned about climate change and you're very risk averse when it comes to climate change, that belief is then often coupled with exactly the opposite attitude towards this issue. So like on the one hand you're very scared or you're very risk averse to climate change turning out catastrophic, you want to act very strongly against that. on the other hand, you're being very certain that with a very narrow set of technologies, you can solve this issue.
I have a question. You're asking the question, is that a smart idea for a potential existential risk? But at the same time, you argued before that there are low carbon kind of fuels, like for example, nuclears or renewables. So now you're saying renewables is maybe not an option. So, but if we take nuclear power somehow into account, then we have another potential existential risk, and then we double our.
What is the existential risk there?
Well, there could be some disasters from nuclear power.
Yeah, but that's not an existential risk.
Well,
like there's no
maybe
scenario
not if
where
you're far enough away not to.
Yeah, well,
affected,
existential
right?
risk is like existential risk for humanity, and the nuclear. I mean, even like.
Okay, and small parts of humanity doesn't matter then, like.
Well, that's at least in the definition of
that's a risk.
existential risk. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I know there's no energy technology without risk, but I mean the thing is that we often think about solar and wind as if they had no risk, and that's true in the sense that okay, like lots of people actually die from installing solar panels on their roofs, but actually, seriously. But this is not really what we mean when we talk about risk, or at least not about societal risk. But the important thing is that there might not be a risk to this particular technology or this installation, like it's not going to explode, it doesn't emit carbon emissions, it's not radiating, but the political strategy on relying on these technologies only has a huge risk of like being completely infeasible to meet the climate change targets. If you actually look at the most, if you look at the scenarios which run, like energy scenarios which run on only renewables and energy efficiency, and you compare this with other scenarios, or compare this with historical rates of energy change, etc., it becomes very clear that this seems extremely implausible. Yeah. I mean, in the most prominent model that assumes 100% renewables, you actually assume that until 2030 energy demand is going to decrease to 2050. So in a time where we're adding like 2 million people to the world population and stuff, we're assuming energy demand is going to decrease.
Don't you believe in general that 100% renewables is possible, or do you just want to speak out for like bridge technology, like nuclear power as a bridge technology to like close the gap between acting fast and climate change?
I mean, as I said, I think like the important question is, I mean, I think 100% renewables is like possible in an engineering, technological kind of way. Like, I mean, if we like woke up tomorrow and every citizen of the earth would say like, this is the most important thing for me, that we have 100% renewable energy, I'm sure we could do that. For me, the point is more
strategic.
It's more like a strategic and political and economic one, and then also one with timeline. Yes.
But I mean, like in 100 years, do you think it's feasible then?
Well, I mean, it depends on whether we want it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's feasible right now if we really want it.
Yeah.
And if we really feel the need for it.
So you're saying it's hard to estimate because it depends so much on the change of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, and the population. And I don't really worry about climate change about in 100 years. I worry about AI in 100 years. So kind of climate change is kind of a bridge problem. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, this is kind of the last slide about technologies. It's about nuclear power. I think, yeah, that could probably be a controversial discussion here. But I think it's pretty clear that you should always prefer nuclear power over coal, because coal kills about, coal kills about 3 million people every year with air pollution. And, nuclear doesn't. And it's low carbon. And also, if you look about, I mean, the major part of the talk is about innovation. If you talk about advanced nuclear technologies, they're actually built in a way that most risks that we care about now with nuclear are not possible anymore, because the physical process is a different one. And yeah, so I would say, I mean, in my view, and I've spent lots of time thinking about this, because I mean, I was in the German Green protesting against nuclear 10 years ago, and I kind of changed my mind very much on this. But I think even if you're skeptical about nuclear, should be much more optimistic about advanced nuclear, and also in terms of the figures, like of the energy scenarios. So it's pretty clear that we need essentially everything that we have in terms of low carbon energy supply. Want to discuss this more, or?
But isn't developing those technologies also extremely expensive? And if you make this, like if you compute it through for renewables, you then have to do the same thing with that, right?
Yeah, we're going to go there. I actually don't think that innovation is so expensive, and it's especially not expensive compared to what we're spending on subsidizing the building of technology. But I'm going to get to that in quite some detail. If we're going to get to that, we should get to that. Yeah.
Do you consider like social aspects as like central power production versus decentral power production and the regional like creation of money?
Yeah, so I think these are aspects that people use in the debate. And for me, and I feel like for me as an EA, I would say, I feel that, or I reason.
So
I would say that it's very clear that these things are very unimportant compared to climate change, compared to energy poverty, and compared to air pollution. So when someone in Germany tells me that they want to solve climate change, and then the next sentence to say it's also equally important to have a local power production, etc. Like I mean, okay, I can accept this as a political preference, but from an EA perspective, I cannot give this much weight.
And what about building all the grids up, for example? It takes a lot of time as well. In developing countries, there are no grids. So how do you want to reach with centralized power production? How do you want to reach all the villages which are not yet connected to the grid?
There's no. So just to be clear, there's no saying. I mean, we're not down through. There's no saying here we should build only nuclear or only renewables. My argument is kind of we should build all of that. So if you have,
Fair tactics.
If you want to electrify rural areas that are not connected to the grid, then solar and wind can be good ideas.
There are tiny nuclear power plants.
You could also, yes, of course, you could also do that. I mean, yes, but I think, I mean, the thing that's often overlooked is that the developing world is essentially urbanizing at an astounding rate. And if you look at, so it feels sometimes, or I have the impression that...
It's not neglected in cities, electricity, but in villages it's neglected.
Yes, what is neglected in cities is the clean energy or low carbon energy, which you see very clearly in China and in India. And so I think rural electrification is important, but I think the more important question is how do we get from the current trajectory of building so much coal? Because it's not like Delhi or Beijing, it's not powered by solar and wind, which doesn't mean it couldn't be or it shouldn't be. In the future, yeah, we should not have. We should not overemphasize the role of villages in the developing world. I mean, this is not where energy demand is growing. This is not where the world is going. I mean, they're moving into cities.
Comment on the last sentence on the slide, and coming back to political and strategic feasibility.
Sorry, which one?
The last sentence. So you think this is like politically feasible?
To build more nuclear?
Yes.
I think outside Germany, yes.
Okay.
In Germany, I mean, I work in Germany. I don't work on this issue because I don't think it makes sense to work on this issue in Germany. But I think in other countries, yes. I mean, there's rather rapid change right now in the US. There's, for the first time, really like a pro-nuclear environmental movement, which is, mobilizing and getting quite some press and success. So you also have examples. I mean, so for example, New York State decided, just 3 months ago, they want to get to 80% low carbon electricity with nuclear and renewables. Sweden kind of decided the same thing, to go 100% low carbon with nuclear and renewables. So in the UK it's similar. So I think there's a lot more pragmatic countries where a lot of these things are becoming more and more feasible.
Sorry to be the paranoid American in the room, but do you have any soothing words to somebody who might say that when you expand nuclear, it gets into all kinds of hands, and the byproducts and the parts of it, even the knowledge and technology involved, could be used for political instability, like getting rid of bombs and stuff?
I mean, I'm very worried about nuclear terrorism.
State.
Sorry?
Personally state, but also non-state actors as well.
Yeah, I'm most worried about non-state actors, but so I'm very worried about that issue, and I think it's actually the most serious concern against nuclear. I mean, it's far more serious than other concerns. I think we're extremely far from a world where it's hard to have access to nuclear technology. And what I'm talking about, I mean, we're not in a situation where the result of this talk will decide that we're not going to have nuclear power plants. I think we're in a situation where the question is, do we support building more nuclear power? I'm not sure it will actually, either way, will change the general availability. I mean, North Korea, which is one of the poorest countries on earth, is still able to run a nuclear power program. I think every emerging economy that is willing to develop nuclear weapons is going to be able to do that, and that's a problem. But we're not going to solve this through anti-nuclear advocacy. That would be my take.
But you just said you were worried about non-state actors.
Yes, of course.
And I could imagine that the more available and widespread nuclear use becomes, the more easy it is to maybe steal from the factory, or I don't know how they obtain it.
It doesn't really work like that.
No.
Well, so nuclear fuel is not, you cannot use it for nuclear weapons without enriching the fuel, and that needs serious technology, which you will not just do in your garage, for example.
I think I'm still struggling with your ethical reasoning behind nuclear power, because so given the evidence that there is no incident that something happens to a nuclear plant, so your argument is that you're pro-nuclear because you think that improves people's lives in some cases, that they have energy supply. But on the other hand, in case something happens, it'll destroy people's lives over over many generations. So I don't get what is the equation?
Okay, I think I kind of wanted to, because I also wanted to go to the other slide, but so if you look at I think there is no perfect energy technology. I mean, wind and solar are kind of perfect in the sense that they're not exploding, not radiating, but they're not perfect in the sense that if you're serious about climate change, we should also use other things. but I think the issue is there if you look at numbers and weighing risks against each other. So if you look at the worst like nuclear accident in history, like Chernobyl, so like the estimates, there's one estimate from Greenpeace which estimates it at 1 million, which is a non-peer-reviewed study. And then there's like massive scientific work from the United Nations, from World Health Organization, etc. And they're summarizing all the literature. Their estimate is more like at 10,000. I put a lot more faith in this 10,000 estimate than in this 1 million estimate. And assuming that it's more in the range of 10,000 for the worst nuclear accident, and knowing what we know about air pollution, about energy poverty, about climate change.
So you're
I
kind
think
of weighing it
yes,
against
I'm weighing it against each other. I mean, there's a study from James Hansen, for example. He says like nuclear that has been deployed until now has already saved almost like 2 million lives, which is that like if you look at if the comparison is coal, of course. If you would have the air pollution, then you would have so much more deaths. Yeah. So I mean, if we're in a situation where we have 100% renewable option, then I think that's, I mean, like I would reconsider my position. But I don't think, I don't think that's the right situation.
I had the impression that you said that he promotes nuclear energy only in order to have more energy for better life quality, but possibly more important, but definitely also important, is the fact that there will be a demand for energy anyway, and if we don't satisfy it with nuclear energy, there will be more fossil energy, which is very lethal.
Yeah. But I also I don't like the term pro-nuclear, because it sounds as if I'm against other things. I mean, I would say I'm zero carbon green. I'm I'm excited about renewables. I'm excited about everything that's not coal, essentially. Or I can even be excited about coal if we someone invents CCS. Yeah, and that's kind of a summary of the section, or why do we need innovation. Now I'm citing some of my professional work. I mean, one is that, as we saw for the renewables, like storage is really the big problem. Also for renewables, relatedly, there's like value deflation. If you're in Germany, you have days where you have 100% renewables, where it doesn't really make sense to install more renewable capacity, because in these situations you have actually negative prices. You have to pay someone to take your electricity. So this is why there's really a big need, even if renewables are cheap enough at a specific point in time, to make them ever cheaper, because otherwise you would never get to a really high penetration of renewables, because the additional value of an additional unit of renewable in a location that has a similar weather profile will always decrease. There's also the situation that incumbent firms might innovate, but they innovate in a very reduced way. So for example, if you look at Tesla right now, they have a big interest because they built a massive factory to develop lithium-ion batteries, which is kind of the current battery technology. But this technology is fundamentally limited. Close to its chemical potential already in terms of how we have innovated on it. There are next generation batteries, but Tesla doesn't have an interest in developing those. So this kind of gives an idea of why we need government support for other technologies. Yeah, as we said, electricity is only a small part of energy, and we need to store carbon.
Yeah, the lithium-ion batteries, they are not solving the storage problem anyway. So
yeah,
gas is
Sorry?
gas is the solution.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
As you can store it like 6 months and supply whole Germany.
Yeah.
The gas net, which is already there.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
That's one guy from Audi who told me he was working in an innovation department.
Yeah.
Natural gas? Natural gas?
So like gas from fracking?
No,
gas from biogas.
Yeah.
From renewables, I don't know how to say in English. I'm not that.
Yeah.
I'm not really.
Biogas.
Yeah. Methanisierung, windgas, and
Oh.
wind energy.
Yeah,
it's
so
transparent into gas.
Yeah, so you would essentially create biofuels from wind energy surplus. Yeah. I mean, that's also one of these technologies that we should really spend much more on. Okay, people are getting tired. Yeah, good. I'm going to skip that slide here. Yeah, now we're going to get a bit more EA again. So I think I kind of talked about a lot of the trends already and why we need innovation. And I mean, now I'm going to talk about what is low carbon energy innovation policy and how could we maybe support it as EAs, or why we should do that. And so what I'm talking about is essentially innovation across the entire path of developing something. So it starts from university research or support for research, government and private labs, support for demonstration, tax credits for research and development, public procurement. So like a large range of policies that support innovation. And yeah, I think we can also skip this slide. So if you look at how we're actually spending our money, that we spend a lot of money on climate change. But this is from a study of 6 European countries, and they estimated if the goal is to foster innovation, how would you distribute money between supporting innovation and supporting the building of new technologies. So like, or just like, so example, like in Germany building another wind turbine versus giving money to a lab working on next generation wind technology. And the ratios that I kind of come up with is you should, for wind at that particular point in time, you should spend about 2/3 on R&D, on innovation funding. For solar, it's about 1/3. And this is kind of the spending at that time. So over 99.9% are spent on building existing technology, or subsidizing the building of existing technology versus the development of new technology. So it's massively neglected. I mean, or at least in this policy space, it appears massively neglected.
Is this private and state together, or?
No, I mean this is public. This is public investment. Yeah.
Private is probably different then.
I mean the situation is not. I mean, it's not fundamentally different. I mean, energy, like innovation in energy, is generally very hard. I would have another story about that on another slide, but yeah. And then I think there's another. So I mean, this is effectiveness now, and this is for. I mean, this is for specific. I mean, this is for wind in Germany in a specific time. So I'm not claiming it's always 6 times more effective than deployment. I'm just saying there are situations where. So this is saying what would happen for innovation, for patents, if we had spent 1 standard deviation more on innovation versus 1 standard deviation more on deployment. And what you see here is like a 6-fold difference in terms of effectiveness, in terms of triggering innovation. This is probably an extreme case. But then increasing deployment by 1 standard deviation is also massively more important than increasing research and development by 1 standard deviation because of the funding pattern. So the entire world right now, or governments right now, have just committed to spending 30 billion every year by 2020 on energy innovation, whereas that is like Germany, like in years where the subsidies were the highest, this is kind of what we spent on a yearly basis on subsidies for wind and solar, and this is just Germany. So there's a massive mismatch in terms of the proportions.
Subsidies for deployment,
yeah,
or because we were pointing at RNG.
We're spending much more on deployment than on R&D. Yeah, and I think they're...
What is R&D?
Research, demonstration, and development. So it's a bit more... basic R&D would mostly be like university funding and stuff like that, and RD&D is kind of a notion that you support more for the entire innovation process. You also support demonstration projects so that we're there first trying out new technology.
So like research in the wider sense?
Yeah, or accelerating technological change. I mean, that's kind of, for me, is an important thing. Yeah. And so, like, I mean, when I first showed these slides in a presentation long ago, people were saying, like, if it looks like if the neglect is so stark and that seems so irrational, why would that be the case? Kind of people were a little bit in disbelief. But I think there are a lot of reasons why energy innovation is really neglected. First, the transformation in the energy sector is very hard. It's a massive sector with old incumbent firms that are very large, very long-term investments, a lot of state intervention. And, I mean, if you think about electricity only competes on price. All the other things that we care about with electricity, like radiation, carbon pollution, air pollution, reliability of supply, all of these other things are not directly like in the price for the consumer. I mean, maybe through policies they get there, but so technologies that can be much better on all of these things that we care about wouldn't naturally just come about just by consumer demand. And yeah, old incumbents, I mean, the fossil fuel industry, I think, is well known. They usually like change in the energy field. But it's not very different with renewable and solar, or, I mean, the example like Tesla. They're having interest in promoting their specific technology. They're not having interest in developing the next generation of batteries or solar panels. And also, I mean, this applies more to the US than here, but there's often this idea on the political right that the market will kind of create all the innovation necessary by itself. And then on the left, or on the environmentalist side, there's often the belief that we already have all of the technologies that we need. So energy innovation kind of finds itself at this spot where there doesn't seem to be a natural support base in terms of political constituency. That's why I think we should get involved. Yeah, and then also when you... Yeah.
Could I please clarify? Techno-fixes means that new technology always creates new problems. That's what the Greens' opinion is. And not that we have all the technology.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet. This is now... No, yes, here, this is...
New technology development always creates new problems which have to be again solved by technology. That is meant by technological fixes, and not that we have all technology.
No, but this was not what I was talking about. I was talking about this point here. Right? We're now here. Yeah. But I mean, whether all technology creates problems, yes, all technologies have problems. The question is, how big are these problems compared to? And technology is not good or bad by itself. It can be useful or awful. And also, of course, when innovation, of course, always has the public good problem that when you innovate, it's very easy for others to copy that. So as a market actor, you always have very little incentive to innovate.
So are you saying that even Tesla as a company is behaving egoistically? That they care more about their bottom line than like technological innovation for the greater good?
The battery
is like, it's surprising. I thought, Elon Musk spoke at Gay Global, so how does that work?
Die Batterie amortisiert sich nach 100.000 gefahrenen Kilometern. Audi gibt eine Lebensdauer an Autos 200.000 Kilometer. Das ist nicht die Karosserie, wenn du Lifecycle Assessment anschaust, also alle Faktoren, die reinkommen. Da ist alles.
I'll make this question best discussed with the beer afterwards, so that we can continue with the talk. Thanks.
Yeah, but I would say, I would say market actors are generally constrained. There's nothing evil about that. It's just something we have to be aware of, and then just then we shouldn't say we just leave it all to the private sector. Yeah. So the takeaways from this section kind of is Bill Gates, the video we saw, and he says kind of the one superpower he would like to have is low carbon, cheap energy. And also, it's kind of tractable. So, we can never, when we spend money on innovation, we can never guarantee that this specific technology will pan out. But it's fairly well established that generally investing in innovation has strong effects. Yeah, so we should very much increase this effort. And yeah, the American National Academy of Science says it's lots of experts say this. But this argument has fairly little traction in the policy debate. I would say this for Europe, it's a bit different in the United States right now, luckily. But at least in Germany, where I can know the most about, or also from the perception of the European debate, it doesn't seem very prominent. We're very focused on decarbonizing Germany with existing technology. We're not developing CCS. We're not, not really triggering breakthrough innovation. Yeah. So this is kind of the end of the essentials. There's now some optional stuff, but I'm not sure whether I should go through this or whether we should stop and discuss or whether we should stop and think here.
Yeah, can I ask a question about the energy and innovation? What sorts of innovations, what sort of technology do you think should we invest in?
Yeah, a couple of them were in the video.
Yeah, the CCS.
Carbon capture is definitely, this is, I feel like, I think where it's most clear that we're neglecting this, because, all the experts kind of modeling kind of agrees that we need it, and we pretend that we don't, or often in terms of national policy. And I think then storage technologies, because of the limits of lithium-ion batteries and stuff, and other sectors, decarbonizing other sectors than electricity, and I would also add advanced nuclear. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff in advanced renewables also that's also really interesting. There's solar perovskite technology, so advanced solar panels. Then there's this airborne wind. There's ocean energy. There's a lot of energy opportunities, but of course much of the discussion and also the political economic interest. Why is it that we have so much more funding for the subsidies for existing technology versus research? Well, because and now we have large industries, large economic interests. They're very much interested in getting subsidies for existing technologies, whereas in general, the innovation system, universities, etc., seem to be much much worse in terms of attracting the same kind of public support, even though they would probably deserve it more, or at least deserve it significantly more than what they're getting.
So, what actionable strategy do you propose, given that the political situation, lobbying-wise and everything, seems difficult? Like, what would a climate EA do?
Yes. What would a climate EA do? Sorry, or do?
No, it's okay. Please.
Yeah. I mean, I think what a climate EA would do. So, I mean, if you think about what climate EAs do until now, or what the recommendations are. So, for example, donating for Cool Earth, which is like buying rainforest. To me, doesn't seem to be the best strategy because. I mean, this offsetting, like there's going to be a lot of demand for offsetting anyway in the future. And the other issue being that, like, a rainforest is a rainforest is a rainforest. Like, there's no scaling effect there. Whereas if you would only make, if you would find a way to, like, make a, like, significant impact to triggering technological change sooner rather than later, this would have probably a massively higher impact. The problem is the problem right now, I think, we don't know of any like highly effective charities that work politically to foster energy innovation. I think that's kind of the bottleneck that I would see. Otherwise, I would have an organization here.
So, to understand your questions, did you say that a Cool Earth is a current EA strategy?
Cool Earth is the recommendation for like from giving what we can if you care about climate change. Then the other ones are like political organizations that work for carbon taxes. But
You think so?
That's the other organizations I recommend, and I think like the charity that I would like to see in terms of getting real about effective energy altruism would be a charity that focuses on political advocacy for more innovation funding and push technologies.
Yeah, so like a highly motivated climate EA should found such a charity or make someone found it.
Could you deliberate a bit on what advanced nuclear refers on and how it is different from what we know as nuclear energy today, and especially maybe from compared to the past nuclear power, such as the plants that were built in Chernobyl, which is used as a frightening example, of course, of what can happen to the old way of doing nuclear.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's called advanced nuclear, and I think the most important difference I would say is that like current nuclear that we have today is light water reactors mostly, and you need a lot of technologies to make it safe and to prevent meltdowns. And there's also technologies that work with like molten salt or other things. So like where the physical process is such that there cannot be a meltdown because it wouldn't explode. So like where essentially the idea is if something goes wrong, the system will shut itself down. Like the physical process will shut itself down, which is like a massive safety improvement. And I mean, this is not some crazy technology. That's essentially technology that we already were like demonstrating in the 1950s, 1960s. And the reason that we got to light water reactors was because the American Navy was very interested in nuclear for submarines, etc. And this is kind of which works with light water but not with molten salt. And this was kind of the reason that nuclear based on light water was promoted and then became the leading technology. And then there was such a large technological lock-in because of incumbency effects and technological maturity effects that until like very recently, we never got serious about these other technologies. So what we call advanced nuclear is essentially nuclear that we could have had in the 1970s probably had we continued researching it back then.
But are those power plants already built? Like, is the technology as advanced that you can already build those power plants?
I mean, there's the Chinese are building reactors right now, like advanced nuclear right now. Like demonstration, not really demonstration stuff. And the Russians are doing a lot of that, and the Americans also. The projections are usually something between like 2025 and 30. But I mean, also like this talk is about accelerating innovation, right? So I would argue that it would be very good to get there faster.
And let me just clarify that the incident which happened in Chernobyl couldn't happen with today's nuclear reactors. So that was an old type of nuclear power plant. So we don't have to be afraid that, yeah, there is a power plant in Hungary and it is going to be the next Chernobyl. It's not going to blow up because, as Johannes explained, it is incapable of doing that. There are physical problems.
Okay, so Fukushima did not happen.
Yes, it did happen.
Yes, but does not. It's like a nuclear power plant blow up. So okay, it was technically different, but the thing was blowing up and it was polluting the.
Yeah, the problem there was that half of the power plant was gone as well, and we do not live at an area where we would need to be worried about the water coming onto in Berlin or anywhere near us, or earthquakes. So nuclear power plants are not advised at places where earthquakes are often happening, but mainland Europe is not such a place. That is why France has over 60% or over 2/3, I don't know exactly, based on nuclear power, and they are not afraid of it.
Well, they are as afraid that they build them on their borders, not in their central one.
Well, I think that might also have to do with supplying Germany, but
is climate change prone to create a danger of earthquakes in our regions?
Not that I'm aware of, no. But I mean, also, I wouldn't like. These recommendations are not specific to a specific region. And also, like, I mean, as I said again, like, this is not like my talk. I mean, should not be like this is all about nuclear. I mean, nuclear is one technology. There are lots of other technologies, and we should make all of them better. But I think,
What about the rubbish?
Wait.
What about the crap?
What about the rubbish? What about the waste? So I would say there's three things. I think one thing, why is the waste issue such a salient issue? And I think because it's very easy to politicize it. Because I mean, you transport it, you need to cipher it, and it's a very attractive topic to create resistance.
What was the thing?
To create resistance.
No, you transport it and you.
Yeah, like you need to store it somewhere. So like it's a very good topic to mobilize like resistance. So I think in terms of, I think it's a huge. If I were an anti-nuclear activist, like I would understand why I would focus on this issue. If you think about like the amount of waste and the way to store it, I think it's like, I would say it's a problem, but it's not a big problem in the sense that there isn't very much nuclear waste. Compared to compared to the energy you create, and also compared to like what you need in a lifetime. And the other thing is reactors that essentially use existing nuclear waste as a the reason it's so dangerous is because it's still so radioactive, contains so much energy. So reprocessing that is actually technologically feasible. Something we should be doing. Yeah, much more of.
And that would also reduce costs, like costs of storing nuclear waste.
Oh, if you reprocess the fuel, yeah.
What you get.
Of course, it would first create a cost of research and development of those technologies.
What? Is it, what's the time?
2 to 10.
2 to 10, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, then there's 30 slides we didn't get through.
And you're going to put them online in the event?
They're already online, yeah. I can put them into the event. Yeah. And I would really, so what I haven't focused much on in this talk is like how to translate this into concrete EA activity, which was also like kind of one of the questions. That's something I want to think about more and write about more, so I'll also update on that. I think my main goal was kind of to provide a perspective that when you think about clean energy or low carbon energy and all of the things that this is connected to, you should really take another look at this issue, because it is very important, and there's also good reason to believe that it's fairly neglected and on the same hand very somewhat tractable. At least on a technological scale. Of course, EAs don't have the money to fund technological breakthroughs. You need to fund organizations that promote government investment into those.